let's get to the point. Happy February. Well, we're nearing February. We have David Evans here. And of course, I'm Jona Lemmonds. And our featured guest is Mr. Seth Phillips. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. So how are we doing? What's happening in good old California and in business and in all the good stuff in between? David?
Me. There's more activity in the market than there was in the past year. So, as far as kind of, sales are picking up. I'm pretty sure as everyone knows, the housing market is on fire. Housing prices are up 13% in Los Angeles. Multifamily transactions are also up as well. So yeah, things are chugging along.
They are.
In spite of the eviction moratorium and the premature, belief that California is going into the mass exodus in California that people are projecting right now is not quite coming to fruition, or it's not the reality that I personally see. That being said, it is my great pleasure to host Mr. Seth Phillips of ADU Gold. Seth has been in the real estate industry in Southern California for 30 years, initially as a real estate broker. ADU Gold is a full service consultation and development company for ADUs, long story short, which are an opportunity to add accessory dwelling units to existing land, and have been a great opportunity to address some of the housing issues in California by adding an additional housing to the 4 units, single families, as well as multifamily apartment buildings, which is giving investors in California's real estate market, which traditionally is compressed returns, an opportunity to increase their cash flow. Seth, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Please share more about.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I think I needed to meet you way back 4 years ago with the whole ADU. So take David and I actually through this. And David, we had a little hiccup there, but that's what life is, because I haven't had coffee. But guess what? You did a great intro about Seth.
Yeah.
And Seth, I'm excited to hear about, how it all began, how's business going. What were some of the challenges that you guys had to face? And then, of course, with COVID and the pandemic, there's a business side and there's the service side. So take us through that.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Well, the my ADU journey began quite some time ago. As David said, I originally started out in Los Angeles as a real estate agent, then became broker. And the real estate career was really excellent. And then, of course, we had the huge market crash back in the 2008, and I went from having a really well-paying job to basically having no job literally overnight. And what I had decided to try next at that point was to start flipping the foreclosure homes, which there was plenty of them, of course. So like many other people did, we started buying houses on the courthouse steps, and primarily they were in South Los Angeles, and we were buying homes for $120,000, doing some fix-up on them and selling for $180,000. So there wasn't much margin in there, but there was basically unlimited inventory available at that point. But during that process, I learned a tremendous amount about construction and flipping of homes. And then as the market started to slowly heal, we just started to flip more expensive homes in more expensive areas. And we just continued following that trend until we got all the way up to the top of the housing food chain, where we were doing ground up new construction in the ultra luxury market in Beverly Hills, Bel Air, Hollywood Hills, and our most expensive house sold for over $10 million. So it was a great education, particularly back in the beginning when we were doing the low cost ones, because the only way to make money, of course, was to do a lot of volume of them. So we were getting where we were doing at least 10 projects at a time. So that was a whole nother skill set that I had to learn, was how to manage multiple construction projects at the same time. So after we were now kind of successfully up into the ultra luxury market, and the market had healed and everything was moving along pretty good again. But the ultra luxury projects are scary because you have to invest millions of dollars up front. And we were a spec building company. And the projects are so complex that they take at least 2 years from the time you start it to where you can hit the market. Well, a lot can go wrong in 2 years. And we'd already been in an upward appreciating market for several years now. And as we all knew, the cycles move, and the market moves in cycles. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. And we've been going up for a long time. So I was starting to get nervous, and to start another 2-year-long project was starting to get really being concerning to me. So my partner and I at that time decided to scale back. So we bought a less expensive home in a less expensive neighborhood. So we bought a property in Culver City that was basically a tear down home. We purchased it for $735,000 with the intention of doing what we had been doing, which is to knock it down, build the biggest 2-story modern box on it, but with an exit price that would be somewhere around the $2 million range, which we were much more confident of. So we bought the house and we hired the architect, started developing the plans, and that's when I very first heard about this new ADU thing, and I was immediately intrigued. So I really deep dived into it, and the more I studied it, the more I understood it, the more I came to believe this was going to be the future of real estate. So very fortunately, I was able to convince my partner to completely switch gears. So instead of knocking down that existing house, we kept it and we just did a really beautiful remodel on it. And then we just went ahead with the first ADU in Los Angeles that would be a 2-story with rooftop deck luxury ADU. So we didn't tippy toe into it. we jumped right into the deep end of it because this is a brand new product and nothing like that had been built yet in the city of Los Angeles. So I had to really get, creative in trying to put together my comps for how I was going to project this project was going to lay out into the future. And because there wasn't anything to compare to, I had just had to make a lot of assumptions. And very fortunately, I was right in my assumptions because we bought it for $735,000 and we sold it for $1,805,000. So we actually did get all the value out of it that I was hoping we were going to. And in the process of doing that, we really, besides of course that we made money ourselves on the project, we did a really important thing in that we actually set a precedence and we set a comp. And one of the questions that I get asked more than probably any other one is, how much value does an ADU bring to a property? And that's a great question, of course. And this is going back to how is values established? Well, whenever there's a transaction, there's going to be an appraisal done on it. And I think people have a kind of like misconception that appraisers set value. So no, they do not. The market sets the value. The value is set by what a willing buyer is willing to pay, period. That's just the way it works. Yeah. So, but an appraiser's job is typically very simple because they're looking at a property that they're appraising. They draw a circle half mile around it. They look at all the properties within that circle that have sold in the last year. that are similar properties and average that out, and boom, they got their number. It's very simple. But when they're coming in to appraise a property with an ADU, they go to look for other properties with ADUs. The odds are they're not going to find any at all. So this is where it gets really dangerous, because now the appraiser has to think. Cause all kinds of chaos in the world. So they're all over the board on the appraisals. But nonetheless, we went in with the assumption that this ADU was going to add this amount of value. And in the process of doing that, we actually set an all-time new sales per square foot record for that area. And that's a pretty nice area of Los Angeles. And when you look at photos of that property, the ADU itself is actually the majority of the value of that property. It was stunning. It was 2-story with rooftop deck. It worth more than the house that we built it in back of. And the guy that bought it lives in the ADU and rents out the front house for $4,500 a month. And if he was renting out the back house, he'd be getting $5,500 a month for that. So there's kind of like this thing with valuation that you can kind of always depend on the basics of real estate. And you basically, and in life, you get what you pay for. And so if you build a beautiful structure, you're going to get rewarded for that. If you build something that is just minimal and very inexpensive and cheaply built and not attractive, you're not going to get rewarded for that. So it's the same principle. If you build something really nice in a nice area, you're going to get rewarded for the value of that at the end, which we did.
I can so relate to like 90% of what you said, because we went through it like almost 4 years ago. And I remember the appraiser coming in, because we kind of just paid, somebody to kind of pre-check it for us.
Right.
And that was an interesting thing. And I agree. It's like it raises the value. It was surprising for us, but we did pursue it. We did a different kind of renovation because I like the outdoor living here in California, sunny California. So for those that, maybe are tuning in and they're not, this is not available to them, what would be your best tips? Like how to find someone like you that can pre-assess, that can give them a quote, that can really give them the truth, of their scenario as far as doing an ADU in their property here in California. And then of course, currently with everything going on, what like David said, it's still in demand. I mean, housing is in demand. People from the city itself, they're trying to move out to the burbs, right? To the suburbs. So what would be your best tips? Like give us your top 5 tips that you can share with someone considering an ADU here in Los Angeles. And what would be the do's and don'ts, if you have any insight on that?
Great. Well, great questions. First is that, starting with, the economics of it, the majority of people that are going to be contemplating building ADUs are going to be doing it because they would like to have an additional income stream being generated by their property, which is great. There are other uses too, of course. Number 2 would probably be people that are building them for multi-generational housing, particularly for housing elderly parents or something like that, which is also, still largely about money, because the cost of assisted living now is just like crazy. And certainly, and then the parents or whoever is in a separate facility with an ADU, then you're going to be saving a huge amount of cost. And then their families are together, they're physically together, although they have their separate living spaces, which is of course much more comfortable. So, but it's still economically a much better way to go. So looking at it from the economic standpoint, there's a very simple kind of rule going back to the value thing that I know is going to apply across the board as we move forward. And that is very simply, whatever your single family home is worth in a particular area on a particular lot, that's what your ADU should be worth per square foot when you build it. So then the question comes, well, another one I get a lot, well, what's the best place to build an ADU? Well, when you're analyzing it from an economic standpoint, that's actually a very simple question to answer, because the cost of the construction is a fixed amount. It doesn't really matter where you build it. It's going to cost approximately the same. Now, in a much more expensive neighborhood, of course, you would probably put in higher end finishes, which would drive up the cost, but still the basic cost of the structure is exactly the same wherever you build it. So if you're building it for economic gain, then the simple answer is build it in the most expensive neighborhood you can, because the more expensive it is, your fixed cost stays the same, the more profit, more equity you generate when you build it. And the rent goes right along with that exact same formula. If it's an expensive neighborhood for the sale of property, it's also going to be an expensive neighborhood for rent. So that formula is just a very simple thing. So just as a kind of like a physical representation of that, when people ask me areas that I recommend, it would just be very simple. Anything like along the 405 corridor would be dynamite, because those are basically beach related communities. And everybody knows that the closer you get to the beach, the higher the cost value of the properties there. So we do a lot of that, but it can work anywhere. But while we're talking about numbers, might as well just get it out on the table. It's very straightforward. We've been building them long enough now that we really got a good handle on this cost part of it. And the all-in cost to build an ADU, and let me make sure I define this, because this is where it gets weird. Contractors throw out all kinds of numbers at you when you talk about them, how much does it cost to build? And unfortunately, contractors, of course, share one little piece of knowledge, is that they know that when a customer asks them that, they know the customer wants to hear a low number. So guess what they tell them? A low number, because they want their business. They want them to get them to sign a contract. After the fact, when you really start to find out what the real number is, now you're in. It's almost impossible to fire a contractor midstream in a project, because if you can, of course, you have the right to do it. However, then you have to hire another contractor to finish the job. And this is where it gets totally funky. That second contractor is going to have to take on all the liability for the work the first contractor did. And that second contractor, depending on how far along they are in the project, isn't going to really know exactly what that contractor did. So the only way a contractor is going to take on that liability is they're going to have to charge you a lot of money to cover their possible liability in the future. So it is expensive to switch contractors. So you got to make that decision very carefully. So when I talk about the all-in price, this is everything from beginning to the end of the process. The first thing is you have to hire an architect. The second thing is you have to hire an engineer to go along with that. And there's lots of state requirements, Title 24, that have to be done. All these calculations, and that's done by the engineer. So those two work together in actually putting together the construction drawings that you need to submit to the municipality to get a building permit. So the cost covers the architect, the engineering, and then a person a human has to actually take those plans physically and take them through the city permitting approval process. And that is not a easy job, and it's a long job, and it costs money for somebody to do that. So now we've got a third thing. Then once you actually get approved by the city, now you got to pay for the permit. And the governments never miss out on an opportunity in construction to add some taxes in there. So the cost of the permit in these different local municipalities in Southern California are quite expensive. So now you've got your permit. Now finally you actually can start now having your contractor go to work doing the building. So you can see there's a lot of stuff that has to happen before you even get to the contractor. And then all the cost of the construction itself, plus some of the things that aren't usually necessarily considered part of that, the site prep, the utility hookup, and all of those items. And then of course, what level of finish are you talking about? When I'm saying all in, I'm talking about everything. Everything, with the possible exception of it might not include the refrigerator or washer and dryer. Those are kind of like items that sometimes are just left to the buyer to do. But all finishes, all the appliances, all the lighting fixtures, the plumbing, everything, all the finished stuff, ready to go turnkey. The total cost that we typically see being charged for that through our sources and our company is $280 per square foot. And we can deliver that reliably and consistently across Southern California, basically. So that gives you a good kind of a just easy benchmark. So 1,000 square foot ADU would be 280,000. Now that's not inexpensive, of course. However, that 1,000 square foot ADU in a nice area could easily generate $3,500 to $4,000 a month in rent. So using this formula that is like really, really a well-known formula, pretty much most of the country, but not in California, because this formula doesn't work here, and that is the 1% rule. And it's a very simple formula, it's 1%. And that simply states that if your rent equals, your monthly rent is 1% or less of the cost of your investment, you've got a home run return. Because what that means is, very simply, 1% monthly, that would mean that you would have a 12% annual gross ROI on that investment. Well, 12% return is crazy. Now, if you're looking at buying an investment property in Los Angeles, for instance, in a multifamily sort of thing, duplex, fourplex, whatever, all the way up to 100 units, you're only going to be looking at typical cap rates, ROIs, that are going to be somewhere in maybe like the 5% range. I mean, that's market. So that 1% rule it's a very simple rule, but you'll never hear it being applied to California property because our land is too expensive. That's the difference. Our land is way more expensive than it is in most places in the country. But with the ADU, it does work. And the reason why it works is because there is no land costs. You already own the land. So you're basically getting this opportunity, courtesy of the government, where they're now going to let you build an income producing asset on free land. So the only thing that is involved in the economic analysis of that is the cost of the construction versus the rent it'll deliver, the cost of the construction versus the equity it'll create. And when you analyze it from that perspective, you could screw that ADU up every way you could possibly do it, and it'll still be a home run at the end of the day. So
Seth,
that's why we're really excited about this opportunity.
hey, Seth, you provided a wealth of knowledge there. A couple quick questions, because from some previous
yes.
that you had made. With the when you did your first ADU on that Culver City project, what year? When did you guys get into? I guess when did your firm start?
Well, we started it at towards the end of 2017, the very beginning of the process, and we finished it at the end of 2018.
Got it. So you guys been in business for a couple of years. Second question, because you made a lot of points about the value proposition, the return on the return on investment on ADUs. Two questions for you. One, how much land do you need to build an ADU? And two, is it something that can be financed, or are they, just cash up front?
Yeah, great question. There's some really wonderful things about how the ADU law was written, because at the basis of it, we have a critical housing shortage in California. And I think most people don't realize how that affects their life. Well, yeah, there's a housing shortage, but I have a house. I'm good. Well, the reality is one of the ways that you can see that manifested, and which is probably the most disturbing of all, is that you can't drive around the city and drive around under a freeway overpass almost anywhere without seeing a homeless encampment. Well, the number one driving force of homelessness is the lack of housing. That's the number one reason. So yes, it affects all of our lives in a very negative way. And that's why this is such an important issue that the state recognized they had to really go at it big with some really revolutionary new ideas to try to counter it. So when they produced the ADU laws, these laws supersede everything virtually in every city. And one of the areas that would supersede is the size of the lot. There is no minimum size lot requirement at all. And any of those other things that they restrict, and of course, before on a single family home, you could have only one living unit on it, period, single family. Well, now single family is basically multifamily. So you can add a second unit to it. Now, under the new version of the ADU law, which passed at the beginning of 2020, went into effect, now you can actually add 2 ADUs to a single family unit. You can add one standard ADU unit, plus you can add a second unit, which would be called a junior ADU, which has some more restrictions to it. It has to be something that's existing space already on the property, but that could include a garage. So you could turn a garage potentially into a junior ADU, plus have a detached or attached full-size ADU, and the ADUs can go up to 1,200 square feet. So the ADU laws are written in a way to supersede a lot of the existing zoning restrictions that exist in every municipality across California, and make it possible for people to build ADUs on it.
So quick question for you. Have you seen, in your experience, has there been an issue with reassessment of values once an ADU is built?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that, what kind of value does it bring? Now, there's a kind of a specific part of that I get asked all the time, is that what's that going to do my property tax?
Right.
That's a little bit more, it's a little easier to define, because once again, thanks to our Prop 13 California, when you're adding an ADU to a property, just like you would if you were adding like a family room to it, you are actually increasing the value of that property. So they're going to want to increase the valuation of that property from the tax assessor perspective, which is the right principle. Now, the cool part about this part of the formula is that say you're in a neighborhood that's $500 a square foot in value, and you're going to add this 1,000 square foot ADU. Well, that would actually increase the value of that property in the market $500,000. But your tax assessor is not going to base the new tax based on that figure. They're just going to base it on the cost, construction cost, and that cost is self-reporting. So you tell them how much it costs. Now, if you tell them it costs you $10,000 to build, they're not stupid. They're not going to go along with that. But any way you cut it, the actual additional property tax hit is going to be a lot less than what the actual value is that's going to add to that property.
Got it. That's thank you for that clarity, because I'm sure that's a question that you get often, is how that's going to affect my property taxes once I build. Yeah.
I just want to add on to that some of the things that you mentioned earlier, which is, you know, the costs, you know, of going to the city, the permitting, just, you know, hiring an architect, an engineer. I went through that, so it's very familiar. But for those that are just thinking about this and getting started, you know, can you give an estimate of what they should expect in that cost within the Los Angeles surrounding areas that they want to ADU, perhaps? Just give them a ballpark that they can expect right now.
Yeah, for the architectural engineering and the expediting, that's that person that takes it through the permitting process. Right now, we're seeing typical costs through our system of about the $10,000 to $15,000 range. And then the permits themselves are going to be in probably the $5,000 to $10,000 range. They're very expensive, and unfortunately, the number one component of the permitting cost is typically school tax. But you know, once again, at least that makes sense. I mean, you're building a new living structure. The assumption would be that a family is going to be living there. They're going to have kids. They're going to need to go to school. Somebody's got to pay for the school. So I mean, at least it makes sense. But nonetheless, it's just more money. So that's just kind of like part of the cost.
I think I was going to say, I think you know, hiring an engineer to have gone to the city for us, it cost us about $750 just for the 1 hour he took a look at something.
Yeah.
So just FYI.
Oh, yeah.
And you're right. It's like 10 to 15,000. Expect that to, especially when you're in a, you know, sort of I guess better location, if you don't mind me saying that. It does go up in price point. So I just wanted to give that 2 cents out. But I think, go ahead, David. I'm just trying to kind of chime into what Seth was saying, so that those that are just thinking about the ADU, or it's their way of pivoting right now to kind of utilize or optimize their properties here. What would be your best advice as far as going back to what you said, you know, talking to a general contractor, you know, to kind of take away the fear and the doubt? Like, what would be your best due diligence tip for someone that's talking to a general contractor that would understand them and not, you know, kind of put themselves in this sensitive issue that could arise if they didn't work with someone that was giving them the truth, per se? Well,
you certainly want to do a good due diligence. So you want to actually be able to visit current sites, completed projects, and ideally speak to the same thing, current clients and past clients. If you do all of that stuff, if you really do it, that's going to go a long way towards giving you confidence. But the other kind of like simple tactical thing is you should always have in a construction contract a combination of the incentive and the stick. So you want to offer out some sort of a bonus if they can get the job done faster than the agreed upon a time. But you also want to have a penalty if they come in beyond the amount of time that they have agreed to build it in. This is really important because this is the number one challenge with contractors, is that I've never met a contractor in my life that will ever say no to another contractor. And these are, of course, small business people. They've got X amount of resources, but if somebody offers them another contract for them to build, they're going to sign it. They only have X amount of resources. So they hit a point where obviously the next contract they sign, they know they really don't have the manpower to fulfill that contract the way they say they are, but they just go through, I'm just guessing here, some sort of mental process where they're going, well, I'll figure that out. Well, this everybody waits longer. That's their solution. Everybody waits longer. So, and you know, that's fine, but that's not cool. It's just not. But time is money, and everybody you talk to that's had experience with contractors, this is their number one complaint. It took a lot longer than they said it was gonna. That's why it's really important to put specific incentives into the contract, the stick and the carrot, so you got that covered. So, okay, well, if you're going to take longer, it's going to cost you money, and that will help to keep them moving along better.
You made some great points, Seth. I think that's something that everyone who's ever had a construction project done. Personally speaking, I remember the construction of my own house, and it was supposed to be a 6-month project turned into a 10-month project. Where I'm originally from Chicago, and what I've learned is that during the down periods, the winter, you tend to get contractors to be a lot more loyal. During the spring and summer months, some of that loyalty kind of dissipates because that's when they get busy. So I'm, yeah. So I can definitely see that. Question with the financing, is there like banks that loan for ADU development, or is this, how do people traditionally finance ADU construction?
Well, because once again, this is a brand new product. This is like everything with ADUs. It's an evolving process. Fortunately, now we're 3 years in plus here, and keep in mind that the history of ADU, this is the kind of thing that you would probably associate with some kind of cool new California thing, but this one is not. Actually, the first ADUs I heard about in the United States was in Portland, Oregon, and Oregon's become a pretty progressive state, and they've been doing it now for about 6 years. But the actual first place that I heard about it was in Vancouver, Canada. And there they've been doing them for over 8 years now. They're called laneway homes instead of accessory dwelling units, because they're built on what they call alleys, is they call laneways there. And it's been so successful there that over 30% of all single family homes now in the city of Vancouver have an ADU. Now just imagine for a moment, in just the city of Los Angeles, if 30% of the single family homes had ADUs, I mean, that would actually by itself make a dent in this housing crisis. I mean, we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of structures. So this is a real deal. I mean, this can actually work. So the lenders are starting to get slowly, keyword, because when you talk about the financial institutions, I mean, they're the most entrenched and conservative of all of them, really. So they're like, oh, this newfangled thing, we can't have anything to do with that. But they're starting to slowly come on board. And one of the number one and two ways that most people are financing ADUs right now. The simplest ones, which would be a HELOC loan, which is just
Right.
equity loan, and HELOCs are pretty readily available again. And the advantages to a HELOC is it's just a line of credit, so you don't have to take it all at once. You can spend it as you need it. The interest rates are great. They're typically just 1% higher than whatever a standard mortgage rate amount is, and you have great flexibility in how you pay it back. And those are done through mortgage brokers. They're done through banks. So people typically do that at the bank they're already banking at. The other would be to just do a cash out refinance of your existing property. That's also a really good thing, particularly now, because if anybody has an existing mortgage on their property that's, like at least a couple years old, if you refi now, you're probably going to get better interest rate on your existing property, and at the same time, then you can pull out the amount of cash that you need to build your ADU. So those would be the two most common ways. But interestingly, there's a really excellent vehicle for this now, and that is in the real traditional market of both Fannie Mae and FHA have lending programs that cover both purchase and construction together. And as you probably know, they just raised the loan limits again just recently. And when we start talking, single family now goes up to a total loan amount of like 780,000, something like that. But
It's 8.2, I think, in LA County.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It varies county to county for sure. But in the multifamily world, it did too. So if you go up to a fourplex in LA County, you can actually get financing up to over $1.5 million with 3.5% down. That's enough money to buy something and build an ADU both. So that's a really, really exciting opportunity.
So Seth, when you, just to interject real quick, so you can use a 203 FHA 203K loan not only for the existing structure, but to build an ADU as well.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing.
Now it is a little tricky. Now there's a little difference. Like with FHA, weirdly, like say you wanted to do a garage conversion, provided that garage is attached to the house, they'll let you do it. But if it's not, they won't. Fannie is, it doesn't matter. It can be a completely separate structure. It could be a conversion, it could be attached, deep detached. They're a little bit more flexible in their program than FHA, but it does work. Probably the only kind of like bummer part, and I'm hoping, and there's a lot of talk about it, so I think it probably will come to pass, is that at this point in time, they are not going to look at the future rental income that you're going to be producing as income you can use towards your qualifying. That should be there. It's not yet. It probably will be in the future, which will help a lot because, yeah, you can get $1.5 million loan, but you have to qualify for it. So you got to have pretty substantial amount of income to be able to qualify for $1.5 million. Now, if they could take in the rental consideration for what you're going to be building and add that into your income, that's going to help a lot more people be able to utilize that kind of financing. So I think that's coming, and hopefully this year.
That's amazing, great insights. That's immense value. Last question for you: in some of the markets in Los Angeles where the housing shortage is the most pronounced, do you do any kind of education with realtors to kind of explain to them why, especially in the residential space, maybe why their clients, when they're buying homes to look at adding ADUs to them as just kind of a value add for them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think every realtor should really understand this, because that part is a for sure, because people are starting to be pretty aware that there is an ADU opportunity. And of course, they're all curious about it. So if you're a realtor and you don't know about ADU, that's going to definitely be a challenge, because you're going to get asked questions. So it's really important that they do know about it. I go speak at real estate offices frequently about this. I've spoken in Monrovia and Arcadia, Van Nuys, all over the place, even the Orange County with different meetup groups. So that's something that I do all the time, because part of my business is doing ADUs now. I mean, when we finished that first project in Culver City, when we finished that was my last spec builder job, because I learned so much through that process about ADUs and really understood it in a way that I just decided that this is what I was going to do. Because one of the things that's really important about the ADU concept is that, yes, it's primarily a vehicle for people to utilize to make more money. It's great. It's an investment. You're investing in your own asset, and you're able to convert that into a better performing asset, because you can add this now. You can make more money. And because I'm in the ADU construction services business and consulting business, I can make money by helping people ADUs. That's great. That's financially. But what's unique about this from my perspective is that there's more to life than money. And this is an opportunity for me now to have both things. I get to make more money, and while I'm doing it, I'm actually helping to solve a really important human problem. So that makes me feel good. Every day I get up, I mean, I've got that extra motivation that pushes me along. And so I'm happy to share my knowledge and my thoughts about ADUs, because I know, potentially I'll get some more business out of that, but I'm spreading the word of ADU, and this is gonna help a lot of people. It's going to improve a lot of people's lives, and it's going to help to tackle a really important overriding challenge that we have to our society, all at the same time. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Seth, I mean, one, first of all, thank you for one, coming on the show, and two, kind of just sharing your I guess your strong passion for ADUs, and just really the possibility it has to tackle some of the issues with the housing crisis in California. On our show, that's something that we've spoken about at length, being a big issue, but not necessarily solutions as much. I mean, we spoke about modular housing developments, but we haven't really gotten the full details about things like how ADUs can help tackle that problem as well. Is it something kind of in your future to maybe do something along with like local municipalities on building where there is land to maybe build ADUs, and not in a more of a, I guess, I don't want to say, not charitable, I guess, pursuit, not necessarily your business, but in partnership with like the cities, like local municipalities in LA County?
Absolutely. And there are some already. Interestingly, this is kind of a long story, but goes with what you're saying. When they passed the original ADU laws, as I said, it supersedes all local laws. Now, when they passed that first law, a lot of cities didn't like that. They didn't like Big Brother telling them about the way their zoning and their housing should be constructed. And so a lot of particularly smaller municipalities, although they couldn't disagree with it, they had to allow ADUs. What they did was they found other little parts of the process that made it basically impossible to build one, even though, of course, you can build one. But give you a for instance, you can only build one if you have a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet, like one of your first questions.
Yeah.
In an area where maybe only 3% of all the lots in the city were over 10,000 square feet. So yeah, you can build one. Unfortunately, there's no piece of land that qualifies. So the state kept track of what the municipalities were doing with their law afterwards. And they saw this pattern of a lot of cities that were finding ways to discourage them, while other cities like Los Angeles were just gung-ho on them. And over 16,000 permits have been pulled for ADUs now in the city of Los Angeles. It works. But these other cities basically put up these other barriers. So the new state law basically took back some of that wiggle room that they had originally given to the local municipalities, to where now they have to do it. And I've seen some just 180-degree turnarounds in some of these local cities. And I'm going to be talking about Pasadena. They were one of them. They hated the idea. They're anti-growth. They just are. That's just the way their culture is. And they didn't like it. Well, now they actually have not only turned around on it and said, yeah, okay, we'll go ahead, but they actually have a government program that actually encourages ADUs and will actually provide money incentives to people that build ADUs that will offer them out at affordable rental rates for X period of years. And there's starting to be more and more of those programs. So absolutely, this is a great vehicle for those kind of ideas where everybody can once again win in this. The homeowner can still receive a reasonable amount of rent. The tenants can actually have an affordable rent to live in. The government can do it without it costing big money for them to do it. It's not just a handout. Everybody just kind of works together to come to an agreement to how to take advantage of this opportunity in a way that actually translates into affordable housing for people that desperately need it.
Wow. This has been a crazy, valuable show. I'm just nodding because it was taking me back from, and you mentioned some stuff about Vancouver, 100%. It's funny how I hear the word laneway. This actually started years back. So in the city of Vancouver, it's very narrow. So people were actually putting these, basically their own units and then turning them into rentals. So 100%. I mean, we can continue on in this discussion, but I think for realtors and brokers, for those that are tuning in, please connect and network, build that team where you can do this kind of, value add to your potential clients that are looking to buy a property and find some solutions around it. Can't thank you enough, Seth, for joining us. And where can they find you, Mr. ADU?
Well, I think I've made that as simple as I can. Our company is ADU Gold. And
there you go.
Website adugold.com. And
so simple.
My email address is seth@adugold.com.
Love it.
And my telephone number is 213-784-4447. And you can reach me on that anytime. That's my mobile. And like I said, I love to share. Appreciate anybody's interest.
Amazing. Just make sure you let Seth know you heard it from here. Thank you so much, Mr. ADU Gold. We will see you all on the next episode. David, any closing remarks?
Thank you for coming on the show, Seth, and being a wealth of knowledge. You've added value to me as a real estate broker, and look forward to the opportunity to be able to connect with you and work with you in the future. And thanks again.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, David. Thank you, Seth.
Okay.
We'll see you on the next episode. Bye
Thank
for
you,
now.
guys. Take care.